from him his righteousness, the most amazing of all exchanges, my sins for Christ's righteousness. If this is so, then we must live our lives trusting in him for our lives. We must live our lives trusting in him for our lives. This glorious verse, the just shall live by their faith, ushered in the Great Reformation. It opened the eyes of Martin Luther, who was trying to earn his salvation by works, as he crawled up by his knees up Scala Santa, which is Pilate's staircase in Rome, saying the required prayers on each step, when God thundered in his heart this verse. And when he heard it, he rose from his knees, he dusted off his robe and marched down, and it changed his life, and it has changed history and your life and mine. And this verse changed the life of Habakkuk, and God means for it to touch our lives today. When God is asking us to trust him, he is not asking us for blind faith. He declares first to Habakkuk, he says, my plan is trustworthy. God's plan is trustworthy. It is written in stone. You see, in the ancient days, there was a couple of ways to communicate to the people. One was to put the message on a scroll of parchment and post it in the center of the town, or give it to a crier. The other was a more sure way, and that was to etch the message on a tablet of stone, where the message could not be blotted out, could not be changed, and could not be lost, and passed and carried from city to city. God declares, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. God's word is written in stone. Down through the centuries, man has tried to obliterate it with their challenges and with their lies, but God's word has remained sure and trustworthy. Jesus said, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word will never pass away. So God's plan is written in stone. His plan to use Babylon to chastise his people. His plan for the believing remnant. His plan for your life and his plan for my life. For our loved ones. For our nation. No one can alter or change those plans. We must, in the midst of the very darkest of trials, trust in God's plan. His word. The just shall live by faith. And next, God's plan is not only trustworthy, but God says, my timing is trustworthy. God declares the revelation that the revelation that he's giving awaits an appointed time or an appointed end. God's timing is involved in his plan. It is sometimes early in our thinking, but it is never late in God's thinking. God says, though it lingers, wait for it. The waiting is the hardest part for us. How hard it is to wait to see judgment come on those that have hurt us or our loved ones, or for judgment to come upon the ungodly nations, or to wait for God to work on our own behalf. God is saying to us, the just shall live by faith. Trust me, my timing is trustworthy. And then he says, my will is trustworthy. God's plan will not prove false. It may linger, but it will certainly come, God says, and will not delay. And God has a history of faithfulness. The Bible from Genesis to Revelation proves his faithfulness. What he has spoken concerning the first coming of Christ, fulfilled. What God declares about the second coming of Christ will be fulfilled. God's promise to you will be fulfilled. God is trustworthy. His will is trustworthy. In Habakkuk 2:14, God declares concerning his completed plan, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. God knew all about what was going on and the evil of the Babylonians, and he called them exactly what they were: arrogant, drunkards, greedy, wicked, and spoke of their end as he spoke one woe after another. Just as she plundered others, she too would be plundered. Just as she built on the bloodshed of others, that would be fuel for the fire of judgment. Just as she drank of the sensual pleasures and enticed others to do so also, she would drink the cup of God's wrath one day. Woe to Babylon. Choosing to bow down to a block of wood. You know, we can cover our idols with gold and silver, but you know what? Those idols cannot speak. They have no breath in them, God declares. We have a living God. And so God declares, Babylon trusts in themselves, but you, the righteous, those of you that have put your faith in Jesus Christ, that exchanged your unrighteousness at the cross for Christ's righteousness, you live by faith. God's plan is trustworthy. His timing is trustworthy. His will is trustworthy. And last, God's sovereignty is trustworthy. And that's God's last answer to Habakkuk's why. And it's found in chapter 2, verse 20. And it begins with the significant word, but. But. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. He's saying the Lord is on his throne. Now, to the prophet, it just didn't look that way, did it? But God was there in his holy temple. And it may not look to us today that God is on the throne, but he is there. The Babylonians would come and destroy and pillage that magnificent temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. But there was a temple that they nor anyone else cannot touch, and that's the temple of God. And Jesus sits upon it. He is sovereign. He is in control of the nations. I love Psalm 2. Whenever I get discouraged, that's where I go. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? I see this world out of control. I see Jesus coming so quickly. I see Ezekiel 38 right on the brink of happening. And then I read Psalm 2. Why do the nations conspire and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth, they take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one, and they say, let us break their chains and throw off their fetters. The one that is enthroned in heaven says, laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. Whatever is happening in your life today, know that you can trust the trustworthiness of God. His plan, his will, his timing, his sovereignty. He's on the throne of the universe, and you need to keep him on the throne of your life. And if you do, then you can walk and live by faith. Well, it's decision time for Habakkuk. What will he do with God's answer to why? Habakkuk surrenders. He surrenders. And in chapter 3 we read this glorious psalm. What did Habakkuk do? He first looked back. He looked back at God's faithfulness in his word and in his life. He said, I have heard of your fame and I stand in awe of your deeds. Habakkuk considered all that the Lord had done in the past, in the history of Israel, and he was in awe. Where do we see all that the Lord has done? It's in his word, isn't it? D.L. Moody said this. He said, I used to think I should close my Bible and pray for faith. But I came to see that it was in studying the Word that I was to get faith. That's where we get faith, from God's Word. God's Word is full of his amazing, glorious deeds. And we've seen this year, as we've studied the divided kingdom and the prophets, amazing prophecies fulfilled, one after another.